So America today, we understand, is the last, and the rabbis understood this, the last great diaspora community experience before the ingathering of the exiles, the return to Israel. It's our last stop on this very long 2,000-year journey. And whereas today you can go to communities throughout the United States, in Borough Park and in Long Island, in Pico Robertson in LA, in North America, in Toronto, Bathurst, and see thriving Orthodox Jewish communities, we have to appreciate that it was a very difficult situation for Jews living in the United States, coming to the United States. As a matter of fact, if we go back 100 and 150 years ago, one of the places it was known, the rabbis would tell you, the rabbis of Eastern Europe, if your kids go there, they'll lose their Judaism, would be the United States. If we go back in history, back to the first exile of the Jews, Babylon, we know that 10 years before the first temple was destroyed, the emperor of Babylon took 10,000 Jews and he brought them to Babylon. Seemingly at the time it was a huge disaster. The big brain drain, stealing the best and the brightest. The rabbis say who was taken out primarily? The commentators? The Torah scholars were taken out and brought to Babylon. And a decade later, when the temple was destroyed, the Jews followed. What seemed to be a disaster a decade earlier turned out to be a huge blessing in disguise. Because when the Jewish population came from the land of Israel after the destruction of the first temple and got to Babylon, what did they find? They'd found the cream of the crop had been living there. The rabbinic leadership, and it set up all the infrastructure, the schools, the yeshivas, everything was ready to go, even the kosher takeaway, everything was there. And what happened? We didn't have mass assimilation. Even after the traumatic experience of the destruction of the temple and this first diaspora experience, the Jewish people were able to stay strong, and Babylon remained the first and the greatest diaspora community of all time. But when those Jews poured out of Russia after the assassination of Tsar Alexander, 2.5 million Jews between 1882 and 1914, and 90% of them went to the United States, what did they find there? They didn't find the 10,000 best and brightest. They found almost 300,000 Reform German Jews who had come maybe 50 years before, come to the big melting pot, and had come to try and escape their Jewish identity largely, and to assimilate into America, and to achieve, as anyone else could, the United States. And this was the ultimate nightmare for those German Jews. Just when they were disappearing and assimilating, suddenly appears on their doorstep 10 times their number of Yiddish-speaking, observant Jews from Eastern Europe. And this was a nightmare for them. And it was a disaster for those Jews who came from Russia. Because unlike the Jews who came at the time of the Babylonian exile and found the infrastructure there, when Jews first came from Russia to America 100 years ago, they found nothing. They found nothing there. No Orthodox infrastructure, no kosher butchers. They had to work in sweatshops on Saturday. Shabbat observance went, and pretty soon everything else followed. And it ended up being largely a disaster where over 90% of those Jews who came from Russia as religious Jews lost their observance in a very, very short period of time. And it's only since the survivors, the rabbinic leadership that survived the Holocaust, was able to come to America and reestablish a community there, do we now have a thriving Orthodox community in the United States. But originally it was bought at a very high price.